basically, we're talking about, are we able to lean in and be present, or do we disappear? So that's the context that we're looking at here. So this is definitely a continuation of what we worked with last week around no justice, no peace, and coming into kind of working with it a little bit differently. So this is from last week. We intuitively know that justice for everyone is the pathway to true peace. And I think that's something that we could all agree on, at least everyone who's here. I don't know that everybody would necessarily agree on that, but I think there's a common acceptance of that here anyway. And also that there are both visible and covert costs for prejudice and discrimination and injustice. So if somebody is homeless, for instance, as we were talking about earlier, there's a cost to them in terms of susceptibility to violence, to being ridiculed or contempt, to being out in the cold. There's all kinds of visible costs. But then there's also the feeling of humiliation and the effect that that has on us when we look away, when we don't connect with another human being like a human being. So that dehumanization really costs us on both sides of the equation, so to speak, of whether in that particular instance we're the one who's oppressing or dehumanizing someone, or we're the receiving end of that. So I have two examples. One has to do with is the Riddle scale, which we briefly talked about last week. And Dorothy Riddle is a psychologist who developed this for the National Task Force on Lesbians and Gays in 1974. It's a long time ago now. And one of the things that I wanted to bring forward is that there's a there's a long way between this repulsion. Gay people are sick. They're pedophiles. They're gonna try and convert everybody. There's those kind of extreme attitudes, and this kind of up to acceptance of you're not a lesbian to me, you're a person. And we see that also with racism. I don't see color. And so what we're looking at is this whole range of appreciation, and the fact that we're uncomfortable is it's just going to happen. We're going to be uncomfortable around people that we don't know personally. And one of the ways that we do get to know people outside of this context is if we have a colleague, or I use the example of Anderson Cooper on CNN, who adopted a baby, and he's an out gay man, but we don't associate him so much with out gay man as much as, a news anchor on CNN, Gloria Vanderbilt's grandson, all of those things. So we start to develop a more complex and nuanced picture of somebody, and that's really something that we need to be able to develop in order to see people as human beings instead of putting them into the categories. And that this conditioning that happens, the stereotypes that we're conditioned to believe, are something that just kind of pours into us through our lifetime. And it takes some effort to really look at those and see, am I just kind of tolerating somebody, or do I really appreciate the diversity and appreciate seeing and knowing people who have a different life history than I do, and who bring something different to the table? So whether that's, something like this when we're talking about gender and sexual orientation, whether it's something like racism, or something like artistic, or an empath, or all of those different things, how can we kind of open ourselves to really moving up the ladder in terms of how we interact with people who are not like us? So Barner Hesse is a associate professor at Northwestern University, and the one before, the Riddle scale, was 1974. This was from just in January this year in 2021. So he has 8 identities, 8 white identities. And what was interesting too is that one of the reasons he developed these was for people of color to be able to kind of assess where the white people that they're interacting with kind of fit into this. But white people can also use this as a way to kind of look at it and go, well, where am I on that scale? So the white abolitionist, what he's talking about there is kind of at the top of the scale of the Riddle scale as well, where we're not allowing whiteness to be dominant, where we're doing our own work, we're not going along. White traitor means we're being a traitor to other white people. We're not going along complicit with racism. We name it. We're the one at a party when someone says a racist joke that we're going, that's not funny, or we don't laugh. And it's uncomfortable to do this. And so that's something that we could acknowledge. So these are just two examples. There's so many more of systemic stereotyping and, in this case, systemic racism. And how can we just kind of keep ourselves in the game if this is not an area where we're actively being oppressed? How can we be engaged in it in a way that isn't top down, I pity them, that kind of thing? How can we stay kind of more true to ourselves? So a settled body is necessary for this. So let's all just stop for a moment. Take a couple of deep breaths. And one of the things that we know as we do this healing work is that when we first start, we find that we have all of these core deficiency beliefs and we take things very personally. We have a lot of black and white thinking. And that's not something that's really conducive to staying and doing this healing work. So most of the time, people will kind of develop capacity as they do more and more in this work. And one of the ways for that might be that, if we're engaged in anti-racist work and we're criticized by somebody, either a white person or a person of color, that we might be able to stay more stable and not take it so personally, to recognize these are some of the common patterns that happen. And that doesn't shake my commitment to a world where racism can be dismantled. So we have to be able to stay in our body and not go into our head, not go into defense, not go into all of that in order to really effectively do this work. So Resmaa Menakem has this amazing book, My Grandmother's Hands, about white body supremacy and black bodies and police bodies. And we've talked about that a lot in different classes. So I'd highly recommend the book if you haven't yet read it. And he's got a lot of interviews and that kind of thing. I interviewed him 3 years ago, I think it was, and that's available. So just to look around and get some more information from him if you're interested in his work, it's really good. He's a therapist as well as a somatic experiencing practitioner, Peter Levine's work. And what he talks about with clean pain is that this is somehow that we're able to turn towards what we don't want to face. And so this happens so quickly, we turn away. It's like walking by someone who's homeless and we just don't let our eyes go there. Or, there's a joke that makes us uncomfortable and we just kind of stay uncomfortable, but we don't challenge it. And so part of what we need to do to work with pain in this way is to be present in our body and to not be shaming ourselves. If we're feeling uncomfortable or shame, to come back to some stability and to let go of what's familiar but harmful. So being included in a group is familiar and it's harmful if we're throwing someone else to the wolves in order to stay in that group. So finding the best parts of ourselves and not knowing what's going to happen, but just knowing I'm committed to being honest and true and acting with integrity. And how can I work with other people, which is very important, and work with myself in a way that I can honor that I'm acting in integrity. So dirty pain is when we respond from our wounded parts and we create more pain. And we see this a lot right now, especially in some of the politics. There's a lot of kind of right wing versus left wing, and a lot of people are acting from fear. And I don't have my share. I need to stop other people from getting my share. And being really unable to have an educated view of what are all the pieces of this and how does it all fit together? And what is the truth? Are we getting our information from trustworthy sources, or are we getting it from somebody who doesn't care about the truth? So dirty pain has a lot of qualities that are familiar to us. So it's this unable to tolerate the discomfort of complexity. We want to see it just as really I'm right, you're wrong, or have that kind of poor you sympathy. One of the steps on the riddle scale was treating gay people as somehow childlike, or if they were more mature, they would be like us. And so we can kind of pity them and kind of bring them along. And then we have all of the internalized self hate. So if you belong to a group that is marginalized somehow or is oppressed, then it's easy to believe the stereotypes and the conditioning that happens. And that's going to have to be something that we all just really work on. What are those? What are our beliefs? What are our ideas? And occasionally they'll come in. I've done a lot of work on this over the years, but occasionally something will still come in and I'm like, wow, where did that come from? And I can see that that's a belief that happened in childhood, that I was raised to believe something like that. And so when we're working with dirty pain, it really is very similar to trauma response. We're dealing with disconnection. I need to feel better than you so that I can feel good about myself. And it's something that we need to keep awareness of. So, talking but not listening to somebody, denying someone else's lived experience. So, if somebody, if a woman is talking to a man and saying something about being scared to go out at night, and the man goes, "Well, that's baloney, you shouldn't be scared." Or, there's just so many examples of that. And fleeing from your body to your head, I think, is such a common one. So when somebody says something and they're being authentic and it's painful, one of the ways that many of us handle that is we jump up into theory or generalities. And also we might jump into, well, other people have it worse than you do. And that's often a weapon that we turn against ourselves. And then we have all of the objectification that happens, around sexual violence. It's like, well, she was dressed in a short skirt. What did she expect? Or stereotypes about Black people don't work as hard as white people. Or there's all kinds of different ways that this happens. And then violence, emotional, social, physical violence, is also part of the expression of dirty pain. So just to sit with that for a moment and see how that resonates for you. Are any of these familiar, of how maybe you get away from really attuning to someone else's pain? And notice your body, your breath. It doesn't help anyone to get caught in a shame spiral. So we're really not looking at this with the idea that we're going to shame ourselves or shame somebody else. We're really looking at it with the eyes of clarity. Can I see it clearly? And if I can see it clearly, then I have some hope of being able to change it. So, this is where we're going to kind of sit for a while and do some inquiry. So, I wanted to look at this one, some of the things around fear of being targeted, and then we're going to go into an inquiry for a minute. So, I'm going to go back to the page in a minute. So, what we're wanting to do is bring up a situation where we're avoiding that dirty pain. And so, disconnecting, blaming ourselves or someone else, escaping into thought, that justification of, well, I'm just one person, I can't really do anything, or, well, it's not really my problem. And all through the inquiry, just keep coming back. We'll start in a minute with just kind of noticing what's happening in our body again, but then staying present with the sensations and energy in our body as we're really kind of looking at something that feels like we're trying to escape from it. And then we're going to bring our highest response to the situation in, and we'll feel that and feel what it feels like to stay connected. So, what if I speak up and make people uncomfortable? What if they show contempt for me? And I could even become a target of violence, lose my status, or even my job. So, that's on the one side. What if I speak up and I experience some negative effects from speaking up? And then we might go into, well, who am I to rock the boat? It's not really my problem. I didn't start it. I'm not racist. I'm not homophobic. And, I'm not responsible for other people's ideas about this. So this is our neuroception. Our nervous system is always perceiving threat. And this is an unconscious process. So if we're feeling threatened, we're going to have a bunch of different things that are going to cascade from that. And so let's sit with that for a moment. What if I speak up and I get some kind of negative result from that? And notice your body. Notice your feet on the floor if they are. Notice your seat. If you have your eyes open, look around the room. Notice if there's anything dangerous. You could look behind you as well. Notice if it's comfortable to take a few deep breaths. And then just look. Bring up a situation where you feel like you could have maybe been a little bit more active in terms of saying something or stopping something. And it could be something at work, it could be a family dinner. We have these opportunities all the time. And so you don't have to pick a 10 out of 10. Maybe just pick something that's a little uncomfortable and notice how that feels in your body. And in this particular instance, where we didn't step up and say something, for whatever reason, we stayed quiet. And if you go into a shame posture, kind of get slumped over, your breathing kind of gets slow, or you're not really breathing much, see if you can bring yourself back up, bring your shoulders back, lift your eyes up. You might do some box breathing or some VU. Just notice, what could you do to settle? You could hold your own hand, put your hand on your heart. This is a time we're thinking about and bringing to mind when we didn't really speak up. This is a time when we were experiencing dirty pain. And notice what it feels like in the body. And it might take a little while for it to move in your body. There might be a lot of contraction. You might have a feeling of heat, or you might have been holding your breath. And then to consider some of the other elements. Well, what if I don't speak up and then I feel contempt for myself? And maybe that's what you're experiencing right now, or maybe not. So there's a cost for not speaking up as well as a cost for speaking up. What if I just go into drinking, eating, shopping, Netflix? What if I stay disconnected because I'm really ashamed that I didn't speak up? And one of the ways that we handle that shame sometimes is that we project it onto someone else. Well, I didn't speak up for that guy at work who was really swishy and just kind of acting like some gay guy on TV. Because, he wasn't so flashy and so in your face. He wouldn't be the target of so much disdain from people. People have to fit in. So notice if there's any of that going on in your mind, projecting the blame onto the person who is the other. And again, connect with your body, stay present. And this is our nervous system's attempt to escape pain. We're trying to escape the fear of what would happen if we do speak up, if we act with the integrity that we wish we had. And then we get mired in this icky, dirty kind of shame, pain, regret, not really being proud of ourselves. And as you're looking at that, if thoughts are coming up that seem like they're kind of dragging you into it, you could do some tapping just on your forehead. Just notice the sound of the tapping, the sensation of the tapping. Take your attention into that instead of the thoughts. You could do some box breathing or another kind of breath to kind of bring you back, reset your system, bring you back. So we're really doing this looking, this inquiry, just as a way to see what does it feel like when I've done that. And I'm assuming everyone has done this. It's very, very common. And so we don't have to shame ourselves for it. We're really just looking at what am I afraid of? And how does that work in my life? In these little examples of someone says something, or we went to a Black Lives Matter protest, or we didn't go to a Black Lives Matter protest, and we get shamed for that. There's so many ways that this exclusion from people we care about comes in, and we're so vulnerable to it. So we're just looking. And notice your whole body again. And now bring to mind, let that go and bring to mind your highest response to the situation. So if you could have done what you wish now you had, or bring to mind a time when you did do that, when you did say something, you didn't laugh at that joke, or when somebody said something, you challenged them and said, "Well, actually, that's not how I look at it. This is how I look at it." And feel that in your body, in your breath, in your mind. Take a few deep breaths, relax your body. Notice if you've disconnected from it or if you're kind of stuck in the prior one. If you are, just see if you can let that go. And sometimes it's helpful to just get up, shake it out. You could shake your body. You could take your fists above your head and throw the energy down. As you breathe out, exhale and let that energy fly right out of your body and into the ground. So if you're stuck in the shame of the last inquiry, bring yourself into here. Sit straight, look up, your hand on your heart. Breathe. And then really feel into a time when you did stand up and where you were in integrity, or a time when you weren't, but how could you rewrite that so that you could feel that, well, next time if that happens, and it will, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to say these words. I'm going to make eye contact. I'm not going to shame them, but I'm going to make eye contact and say the truth. Really feel into that. And it's often very helpful to know that you're not the only one who is involved in this. So you're not the only one that's fighting for social justice or for this particular thing that you're working with. There are many, many other people who feel the same. So you're not alone in this. And then to put your hand on your heart if you want to, and just acknowledge the truth of this. I cannot change the situation by myself, especially when we're looking at these broad societal movements of oppression and injustice. We didn't cause it and we can't change it, not by ourselves. We can get together with other people and work on changing it, but we can't change it by ourselves. And that makes us feel powerless. But how could we be present, move into that, really feel that? I'm willing to face this. I'm willing to feel this clean pain. And at the root of that is the belief that it's going to do some good. I believe in justice and goodness. I believe that when people connect with themselves, that we're basically good. And I can be present with kindness and compassion to myself, to other people who are on my side, who share this view, and other people who aren't as well. I can stop dehumanizing people. I can stay connected with kindness and compassion. And take a moment and really feel into that in your body. The truth, I can't change this by myself. The willingness to feel and face this. Our belief in justice and goodness. And our growing ability to be present with kindness and compassion. We actually don't have to disconnect to get through this. We can stay present. And notice again how you feel head to toes. If you want to shake your body for a minute, if you want to move around, stretch, get some deeper breaths in, take a moment to let the energy of this dissipate out of your body so that you can come back to regulation. Come back to knowing that you can be present here in a kind way with yourself. And then when you're ready, finish the inquiry and knowing that we can always come back and revisit some of these later. And open your eyes.